Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Christine Dixon of The Ordinary Sacred, and I'm so happy that you are here with me in our hotel room in Cuenca, Ecuador. We've been here about 5 days, and tomorrow we go to Vilcabamba, which is our home in Ecuador. So we're excited about that. But today I'm so excited to talk to you about this topic of alone time and how some of us need it more than other people. And need is not even a strong enough word. It's like life or death. It feels like oxygen, that if we don't have alone time, we will suffocate, collapse, completely shut down. And this might be because we are on the autism spectrum or neurodivergent in other ways, uh, possibly because we have complex trauma or just are very highly sensitive or introverted. There might be many reasons why you might relate to this. I'm going to share my specific experience and how I've observed it over my life. Um, Primarily because I have never heard anyone, I haven't found anyone on YouTube anyway. I haven't watched every video, so there might be someone, but who has expressed a similar experience to what I've had. And so I want to share it in hopes that even one person relates and says, "Oh, yes, that's me. I make sense. There's another person like me." And so I'm going to share kind of the different layers, what my parts my inner family has shared with me about how they organized and took on burdens around this and why. And then at the end, I'm going to share a little hack that Brian and I have discovered. So Brian is a safe space for me, is a safe person. So this is something that you might use if you have a safe person that might help you, when you're around that person, so that you don't have to be alone, but you can also be with that person and thrive as well. You still will need some alone time from that person too, but all right. So, like I was saying, if for me, I've observed through my life that it feels like I'm going to die, like I'm holding my breath if I don't have alone time. And then when I do have alone time, it's like, whew, I can breathe for a little bit, right? And so I did learn that this is a common thing for people who are on the autism spectrum. And I want to say here that I identify as autistic level 1, and it's very different. It can be a very different experience, I think, than level 2 and level 3. And one reason why I didn't identify as autistic for a long time was because my examples were level 2 and level 3. So some of the things that I'm going to talk about in my experience can be common in level 1, but may not be in level 2 and 3. And Brian and I were talking about this. His mom is going through stages of dementia currently, and she's in this stage that's really difficult because there's an awareness of the loss of memory and mental function. So there's kind of one foot in awareness and one foot that's not in awareness. And so that there's a lot of suffering in that, right? Because she knows that people are frustrated with her, um and then I don't want to speak for the next stage. What it appears to me like is when in the next stage there's a little bit more um or less suffering because there's not an awareness of the other people and how you're affecting other people. Of course, I don't know that firsthand, so I don't want to speak for that. But I do think that I don't want to compare, but there's a unique experience with level 1 autism because there's enough awareness of the fact that other people are frustrated with us or we are not normal. We're not, we don't, aren't able to hide our emotions as well, or we have limited capacities, and we're very aware of it. And so then our parts are capable of masking, right? Of working really, really hard to get us to do the right thing, say the right thing, look the right way, be right, quote unquote, right, right? And that takes so much energy when we're around other people that we're exhausted. it exhausts us. And so we have to have alone time in order to just kind of take off that mask, not effort so much, relax, be authentically ourselves, and it just gives us a break, right? So I understand that. And there's also other reasons why we need alone time because we need when we are autistic and we're very sensitive to sensory stimuli. We need a space where there's less sensory stimuli, there's less noise, less light, and we can just relax our nervous system. And also emotionally, for me, it feels like I'm holding my breath, but I'm actually holding back tears, right? And once I'm alone, I feel free to cry and release the stress hormones through my tears and regulate my nervous system in that way, right? So just to be able to emote and emotionally regulate. And another reason is that we need to focus on our special interests. And I was trying to explain to Brian, I was saying that even when we're traveling and we're busy and we're with family, I really want to be able to make these videos. And he was saying, "Oh, I totally support your goals and your dreams." And I was saying, "No, it's not about that. It doesn't feel like it's my goal or my dream. It feels like it's my existence. It's who I am." Because learning about myself, about autism and high sensitivity right now, but mainly about internal family systems, is my special interest. So spending time uh, learning more about that and then sharing it with you all, that is my special interest. And it feels like breathing, like I need to do that. And I'm not able to make these videos when anyone else is in the room. So I need alone time to do that, even though you all are here with me. Um, but so, so it's just to be able to spend time on our special interests feels like very life-giving to those of us on the spectrum. So that's another thing that we do in our alone time. So I'm reading notes here because I want to make sure that I actually wrote, I think, 10 pages in my journal about this, just really processing with my parts. I won't read all of it, but I want to refer to it. So my what I started to notice at first was that my critics, my inner critics, I have a whole army of them, they would get very, very active when I'm around another person. It doesn't matter who it is, which was an interesting thing to me because I remember when I asked my dear Cassandra, my people pleasing part, what are you afraid would happen if you didn't please the person in front of you? She said, we'll die. It was very, very strong. And I talked to Brian about that, and he said, well, I have, a desire to please you or to please the kids, people who are close to me, but I don't have a desire to please strangers or people on the street or, that kind of thing. And I said, no, for my system, it is every single person, whoever is in front of me. And so what I do and how I am is under scrutiny but it's internal, right? I notice I have these big inner critics that are constantly saying, you did this wrong, you did that wrong, right? Before I have interaction with people, they're rehearsing, this is what you need to say, this is what you need to do, this is how you need to appear. And then there's a whole team that does that, prepares me to have interaction with people. And then after I have interaction with people, the critics come in and say, you did this wrong and that wrong and this wrong, and you're pathetic and you're terrible, and you're too sensitive and all of those things. And so there's kind of the pre-team and the post-team of interaction with people. And those parts are efforting. They take so much energy, and it's with whoever is in front of me. Um, they don't relax unless I am completely alone. And for a while, the critics would monitor things that I was doing when I was alone, but those were more religiously burdened parts. They were like, you should be doing this, you shouldn't be doing that. There were also some culturally burdened parts that would say, if you do anything enjoyable or if you rest, you're lazy, those kinds of critiques and labels. But um, when I was alone, I try to think, well, what do I do when I'm alone? I'm very much more in touch with what I need. So I'll just intuitively get a glass of water if I need it. I will go to the bathroom if I feel like I need to go to the bathroom. I'll change the temperature of the air. I'll open, the blinds to let light in. I will lay down and take a nap if I'm tired. I will eat something when I'm hungry. I will have what I used to think were guilty pleasures, right? I'll watch a TV show or something on YouTube and eat a fun snack. I'll go for a walk out in nature. I will meditate. I will dance. I will sing. I will spend time in meditation. Sometimes will lead to feeling my emotions. And so I'll feel my anger, my fear, my sadness. I'll let my tears flow. I'll curl up in a ball. I'll shake, right? So those things are who I authentically am, right? It reflects my authentic needs, my authentic emotions, my authentic interests and desires. When I'm alone, I feel permission to focus on those things. And initially, I thought that the reason I couldn't do that when I was around people, there are layers, this is true, but was mainly because I was taught in my religious upbringing that to focus on myself was selfish. Brian was telling me that, we have lots of friends on social media that are still in the religious world, and they continually will post. Brian was saying someone posted recently about how terrible this young generation is for trying to have self-love, that self-love is very selfish and self-indulgent and hedonistic. That was the message that I got in religion and in evangelical Christianity, at least, was you don't ever focus on yourself to be a good person, right? Deserving of love and salvation and, God's attention, I guess. You deserving of heaven, right? You need to sacrifice yourself for the person in front of you. You need to always put the person in front of you above yourself. So I had this layer of inner critics that anytime I had a need or I expressed a need or God forbid a want, never, no, no, no. um, I was a sinner, bad person, deserving of hell. So there was huge, huge backlash in my system if I ever did that. That still exists to a bit today. You can ask Brian. Um, and I have three big inner critics. One of them attacks me verbally and cusses me out and says, you, interestingly, because that would be bad in my religious upbringing as well. But you stupid effing piece of that's what that one will say. And then there's another one that gives me pangs of adrenaline of like, it's almost like a lashing. It feels like a lashing of punishment inside, this feeling of, I don't know how to explain it. It's like adrenaline though. Um, and then there's a third one that punishes me with physical pain. And so there's all kinds of different physical pains that my body will have, and that part is explained that it is punishing me um, for doing the wrong thing, saying the wrong thing, inviting some kind of criticism or shame from another person, right? So these are really big. There have been suicidal parts that are part of this cycle. So, I mean, it's like a really, really, really big consequence internally if I do or say something that is putting my needs in front of someone else's, or being needy. My parts will say I'm a burden on other people because I need to go to the bathroom or I need to go back to the hotel and lay down because I'm exhausted or I feel like I'm going to pass out or I'm having intestinal issues or all these different things. I have a collapse response. I feel like I'm going to faint, right? When those things happen and I advocate for that need, my inner critics come in and really, really punish me for it. So um, let me look at my notes. Let's see. I've talked about some of this already. Um, all right. right. Sorry. Okay. So what I realized it when I was looking back on things, because I had so many just collapse, so I call it collapse response, but shutdown periods, right? Where basically I would go without my needs, and then I would collapse completely, where I couldn't move, I couldn't speak, I couldn't walk, I couldn't do anything. And then I was completely dependent, right? So I started to realize if I ignore my needs, I am totally collapsed. And that happened primarily for me once I hit perimenopause. And I'm going to do another video about the stages of life for me and what it has looked like as an autistic level 1 through the different stages of life. But there's a lot of things that compound, compound, compound. And then during perimenopause, the way I see it is that the hormonal changes do not allow my managers to function anymore. So they can't keep the tears down. They can't keep me from collapsing or having a panic attack or all those things. And so I have no option but to express my needs. And I was thinking about this, that ironically, as a child, my critics basically were telling me, in order to stay alive, you have no option but to suppress your needs, right? But now in perimenopause, my body is basically telling me, you have no option now but to express your needs, or you're going to die, right? Physically. So this was kind of, you're going to die socially if your needs are seen. And now in perimenopause, it's like, if you neglect your needs anymore, you're going to die. So I'm kind of forced to recognize my needs and ask for those to be met, but the critics still come in and get really upset. So there really is this reprogramming that needs to happen. I like how Ralph de la Rosa was saying, it's like as a kid, we learned how to run on Windows 7. And as an adult, that doesn't work anymore. And so we really need to reprogram our system. Um, and I might do another video about this too, but it's basically like we are born into the world from love, from capital S self. You might call it God, if God equals love to you, right? Well, we're born from love, but we come into this world, especially as humans. Brian was saying, we are so dependent. We are dependent for 16 to 25 years or something, right? And so we have to neglect our needs and our authenticity in order to survive socially. And we've got to be programmed socially in this certain way. Okay. But once we become an adult, it's essential that we return to love, that we return to our authenticity, and that we find safe people and safe spaces with which we can do that, or else we will die. Right? So we take on our parts take on this programming, and then in order to survive. But then at some point, we have to let go of that programming in order to survive and to truly live our lives. And so, okay, so I started observing this need for alone time, especially. And as a child, it was really difficult for me when I shared a room. I remember this. I would go in the bathroom if I needed to cry. I was often called a crybaby. Uh, and then eventually I got my own room and I thrived because I had my own space to be by myself, to process, to do all these things, to be myself for a little while. Then, um, when I moved to college, I had a roommate, and I remember I found all of these spaces to myself. I would climb trees, I would go upstairs where nobody went. I would find these little nooks where I could just be by myself and I could breathe. And I would go there throughout the day. And it was just like this instinct that I had to be alone in order to regain energy, right? I remember mom on the spectrum, I can't remember her name, but she was saying that she explains to people, I have to have alone time to recharge in order to be social. So it's not that we're not social or we don't like people or don't want to be around people. we just have to be alone um, to have the capacity to be around people. And we can be alone, be around people, be alone, be around people. It really is like breathing in and out, right? So, so then my first marriage, as you all know, was incredibly difficult. And then once I had children, and this can be a really, really difficult stage for many people on the autism spectrum, because there's just no alone time. You have a dependent there with you all the time that and for me, again, it was like I have to sacrifice myself completely for this being or these beings. And so I was never allowed, I was never allowing myself to give to myself unless I was alone, and there was no alone time. So I had so many collapses. I'm convinced that this is one reason why many women have mental breakdowns when they first have children, because they desperately need alone time in order to be mentally stable, to process, to take care of their own needs, right? To get rest and all of those things. Um, okay, so then I started to really improve my mental health, my physical health, my emotional health once my children started going to preschool. And I realized, oh, I had alone time. That's why. Um, and then during the summers, every summer, I would have panic attacks, um, nervous breakdowns is what I felt like they were, collapse responses, just total shutdowns, because it was like I was holding my breath. I didn't have any alone time at all. Um, and so I started realizing that when my kids started getting older during the summer, it's like I would just sit on the couch and wait for them to need something. And it was like I couldn't do anything for myself because there were people in the house and I was responsible for everyone. And whenever anyone else was in the house, I was completely disconnected from my own needs. And there was no permission inside to do anything for myself. So I would just sit and wait for if they needed anything. Um, and so I started realizing that even though, like I've said in another video, I say about Brian that being with him is like being alone. And that is the biggest compliment I can give him. And it's true because he's so accepting of who I authentically am and just never shames me for anything. I've gotten to the point where I can rest, I can, um, you know, watch a show I like. And these are things that I would not ever allow myself to do in front of another person. And so I can do that, I can be myself and he accepts it. However, since he's been retired and we're in the van together 24/7, we're in hotel rooms 24/7, I just have parts that are like I desperately still need time to myself. And I've had to constantly ask for it, which again, my inner critics get really upset at. You don't ask for something for yourself. They're less burdened now, and they're less burdened with Brian, but they still have a really hard time having to ask for it over and over. I was telling Brian that during the period of life when the kids were in school and he was at work, I had 5 or 6 hours of alone time 5 days a week. And I thrived in that. I look back and realize I thrived in that because when the kids came home, I could fully focus on them. When Brian came home, I could focus on him and I wanted to, right? Because all my needs had been taken care of earlier. But during the summers or during breaks, it was like I was holding my breath and I could not meet my own needs in front of another person. Okay, so I want to just share a little bit about realizing that it was more than just a religious burden, that it really had to do with the fact that being born highly sensitive and autistic level 1, I learned from a very early age through experience after experience after experience of realizing I'm doing the wrong thing. People are getting upset with me. I can't predict it. I don't know what's going on here. That I developed these very hyper vigilant managers that were scanning every person and their reactions and their facial cues and to see, are they happy with me? Are they upset with me? What do they want? Right? And so they became really adept at trying to figure that out. I didn't always get it right, but um, this is why a lot of people on the autism spectrum have, I would say, an inner family parts profile of big people pleasers, big perfectionist parts, big hyper vigilant, parts, a lot of anxious parts, and then big inner critics. Right. So when I went in and I asked my system, who's here around this? Who doesn't let me connect to my needs when I'm around another person? Um, it was great. Cassandra came up and she's like, "It's me and my whole team. We make sure that you are disconnected from anything that you need and you are only facing outward to scan what other people need and give it to them." Right? And I mean, it was a brilliant strategy. And there's a whole list of my parts that were like, and I help too, and me, right? And there was, if you're familiar with some of my parts, there was Death Girl, Edna, Trampoline Boy, Dracula, Chewbacca, um, my 3-year-old perfectionist. And there's another part that just feels like she's responsible for every person in the room. They're this kind of form this whole team. There's another part that is like autopilot, just puts me on autopilot. So I'm not connected, right, to the present, and I'm not connected to myself. But all of these parts are basically what I call now my masking team, right? And they work so hard to get me to just be acceptable socially, right? And if and when I am not acceptable socially, when there's any kind of criticism or rejection or sign of it, um, this is called rejection sensitivity in neurodivergence, right? Whenever there's any sign of that, even just a hint, my inner critics swoop in. This is why I like that Ralph de la Rosa calls the critics firefighters. That is my experience. These managers, this whole team, masking team, they work really hard to prevent criticism and abandonment and rejection. And then, but if it doesn't work, then the critics swoop in and they're like, "You terrible, pathetic being. Like, you did it again. You're the cause of this," kind of thing. So, and then they work really hard too, and they have their good intentions, and I've talked about some of them already. I have other parts too that will help me kind of numb or dissociate, or parts that have come out of exile. This my beautiful Sebastian, and I have a 16-year-old part that comes out in anger now. But they've worked really hard. And so I asked them recently, I asked Cassandra and her team, I said, um, or I just observed them and I got the sense of I must do whatever the person in front of me wants or else. And I said, or else what? And they said, we'll lose connection, we'll be rejected, abandoned, and alone. And then I would, been able to go to time lots of times when they experienced this. But I've said before that Cassandra was my people-pleasing part, and her whole team took a year and a half to really witness. But I think there's even more experiences because this is just from the womb, like being a highly sensitive person and understanding that I was different, right? Just the experience, I talked about this in my video on IFS and autism, but as a child, when I would go to a birthday party and they would pop balloons, it was excruciating to me. It was terrifying. I felt painful, that loud kind of sounds or sirens or that kind of thing. And people who didn't experience that, neurotypical people, they would say, "Oh, honey, it's okay. It's not going to hurt you. It's fine. Come on." And people didn't know how to support that. And then I got the message, something's wrong with me. Something must be wrong with me. And internalized that. And then my whole system developed to try to make me be right, make me be okay. And so realizing that when I'm around anybody, those teams of parts are working so hard. So it's no wonder I'm exhausted. And when I'm by myself, I can relax and take care of my needs. And so it's been really wonderful, explaining this to Brian because he's a safe person and he's very supportive. He has said, okay, so one thing we'll do is whether we're in the van or we're in a hotel room, we'll have a chunk of, a couple hours a day where he goes out to the lobby and, you know, does stuff on his computer or whatever. And I'm in here. And it's like, it's just a designated routine of alone time where you will have alone time. And because he says, I want you to be able to care for yourself. And if you can only do that while you're alone, then I support that. I support you doing that while you're alone. And one other thing that we've discovered that this is kind of the hack that has been incredible. It's so crazy, but is it reminds me of in Christianity, people would wear these bracelets that said, "What would Jesus do?" And instead, I should get a bracelet that says, "What would I do if I were alone?" Okay, because we have these experiences all the time. I'll just give you a recent one. We are in a hotel, and below us is this mall. Okay, so we go down there to get our meals and walk around and stuff like that. And sometimes there's a sensory overload for me. There's so many people, so much noise, so many lights. Like on the weekend, it was very, very, very just a lot. And so, and then I was also having intestinal issues, and we were there, but we had a plan, right? And the plan was we're going to go and do some shopping and do this, and then we're going to go get dinner. And so my parts perceive this is what Brian wants. And so we cannot ask for something different. So I start having kind of a panic attack and a shutdown response, and my stomach is turning, and I'm just, and we're walking through, and Brian's trying to walk really slow because he thinks that'll help me. And I'm trying to walk really fast, or I want to walk really fast because I'm like, I really need to just sit down and close my eyes somewhere. Um, but I won't voice it to him. I won't say what I need because my parts will say that's selfish, or sometimes I don't even really know what I need. As if there's another person around, like I said, these parts disconnect me from what I need. So I genuinely have to ask myself, imagine you were by yourself, what would you do? Um, and it's so funny because, okay, this is the ironic thing. When I'm with Brian, who I'm normally with, I neglect my own needs because my parts think it's selfish to express my own needs. So then I go without my needs, and then I collapse and I have like shutdowns and meltdowns. And then I'm more dependent on Brian. So I've kind of had to update the system and explain to my parts. It's actually helpful to pretend like, what would I do if I was by myself? Because I would take care of my needs if I was by myself. And then I won't have shutdown and collapse and be totally dependent. And so now that they understand that, they're like, oh, okay. So they're open now to the question. So it's so funny now. Brian will ask me a question and he'll say, what would you do if you were by yourself? So this morning, we woke up and I was trying to see something on the wall. And he said, do you want me to open the blinds or do you want to turn the light on the wall? And the way my parts interpret it is, I don't want to make him do anything. So I don't want to make him open the blinds. So I kind of go, okay, I'll turn the light on the wall. And Brian says, what would you do if you were by yourself? And I said, oh, I would open the blinds. Like it's just a quick, easy question. I always prefer natural light to to artificial light. So it's not like I don't know what I would do. Like as soon as he asks that or I ask that of myself, I know right? So the other day when I was feeling collapsed, and then we went to the restaurant and the music was really loud, the lights were flashing. I just felt like I was gonna pass out, and I was trying to sit in the chair, and I start to shake sometimes too when I'm like sensory overload. So I'm like shaking like this. The waiters are concerned about me. I feel like I have to go to the bathroom. And I finally asked myself, what would I do if I was by myself? I was like, I would get up this second and walk back to my hotel room. I would get out of this environment immediately. But my system didn't let me do it because Brian was around and I didn't want to sabotage the plans or upset him. He wouldn't be upset, right? I update my system. They know he wouldn't be upset, but it's still this almost like this default of I have to please the person in front of me. And so finally I was kind of like this, and I looked up and I said kind of definitively, I'm going to walk back to the room and you can stay here, finish your meal, pay the waiter, and I'll meet you back there. And he was like, okay, you're going to be okay? I said, yeah. I realized that I'm much more independent if I think, what would I do if I were by myself? So I actually did this whole brainstorm, and I was just sitting there by myself. I said, what would I do if I were by myself? And I thought, well, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here by myself because I wouldn't travel by myself. So I can be here because Brian supports me in that. I wouldn't ride taxis in other cities as a woman by myself. And I probably would try to find a bus, or I would find places I could walk. So we wanted to go to this museum. I was saying I wouldn't go to the museum because I would probably have to ride a taxi by myself to get there. I would look on the map and I would find a park that I could walk to, and I would walk to the park. I would go to the mall to get my meals, but I would take them take out, right? I would take them back to my hotel room where I could control the lighting and the noise, and I would eat in peace in the hotel room. I would go out and do something for a little bit, come back and take a nap. Go out and do something for a little bit, come back and take a nap or rest somehow. Um, I would have natural lighting. I would, change the temperature so that it would be warmer, different things. And, I have parts that come up and say, but when you're with another person, you can't just steamroll over them and just do everything that you need, um, negate their needs kind of thing. But because I am, well, there's part of me calling it saying the limiting factor, right? Like the weakest link, but that I don't like those sayings because it's not really a weakness. It's just a difference, right? And there are strengths to it. I am highly sensitive. I am highly attuned to my environment. Um, I just need to be supported and support myself mainly, right? And say, like in the restaurant, I didn't say, Brian, you have to leave right now with me, right? You can stay and you can finish and relax, but I'm going to go and take care of myself in the way that I need to. So anyway, that's the hack. I encourage you to try it if you do relate to my experience and you find that when you're with other people, it's like you just cannot connect your own needs. Envision as if you were alone, what would you do? Right? If I were alone right now, I would lay down. I would get some water. I know that sounds, people who don't relate to this, would be like, that's ridiculous. Don't you know that you're thirsty or hungry or tired? No, I genuinely don't. When I'm with other people, I only know when I collapse, when I just totally have a meltdown or a breakdown. It's like the emotion builds and builds and builds, but I cannot express it in front of another person, cannot until I'm having outbursts or, it's exploding or my physical needs mount until I'm collapsing. So ask yourself that if you experience that, what would I do if I were by myself? How would I take care of myself? And some of you might even have a hard time taking care of yourself when you're by yourself. And so I would encourage you to really get to know the parts that don't let you take care of your own needs. But for me personally, at least, this was an epiphany for me that the inner critics are huge around other people, but not by myself. It's like they come with other people. Another person comes in the room, inner critics come in, right? They're just really, really up around, and I realize that it's connected to being neurodivergent, and so they've had to come in for social things, right? And being a problem to other people. But ironically, at this stage in my life, I have to take care of my needs, or I'm a problem. I'm not functioning at all. So as I learn to take care of my needs in each moment in the way that I need, unapologetically, that this is just who I am and this is what I need, um, then I am less dependent and less of a burden. So it's really, my parts are starting to really get that. Okay. I know I've kind of rambled and I've kind of gone here and there. If you're still here with me, I really appreciate you. Please leave a comment about if you relate to my experience, or if you don't, maybe you know someone who seems to just desperately need alone time, and maybe you'll understand it a little bit better, have some grace on it. Or maybe you are like me, and you can have more acceptance and grace towards yourself and understanding your system, why you desperately need alone time, and what you can do to take care of your needs, to love yourself and value yourself, whether you're by yourself or with other people. So let's see. If you listened to the end here, put in the emojis something that represents being alone. So maybe like a one, or like a finger, or a one person. Um, or maybe it could even be an emoji of something that you like to do when you're alone. Oh, I want to leave you with this because I love this. At breakfast, I was telling Brian that I was going to make this video, and he said, well, people who are alone are in really good company because Jesus went alone, into the desert. Like, he had to get away from the crowds and be alone. And, Buddha um, sat under the Bodhi tree and spent days and days being alone, and that, a source of awakening really is spending time alone, and meditation, introspection, presence. And so he's like, if you want to be like Jesus and Buddha, you got to spend some time alone. It really is a superpower. All right. I appreciate all of you for listening and watching, and I'll see you next time.